Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
My name is Peter, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Peter.
Welcome to the panel this evening, and welcome to Atlanta. Pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure for me to be your chair for this evening. We have, I think, what is going to be an interesting group that's here to present some thoughts and to hear your questions and thoughts in an open forum afterwards. Just a brief announcement to begin with. Ann Warner has asked me to advise you that on the grapevine table there is one copy of the Spanish Language of the Heart, one copy of the Spanish Magazine, and one copy of the 1996 calendar. You're free to look at those, browse through them, but please do not take them with you at this point. That's all there are. When the final gong rings at the end of the seminar, whoever gets them first has them. You can have that fight later, but isn't that all right, Ann?
That's great.
Fine. But in the meantime, please, after you've looked at them, leave them there for the time being. We're going to move right into the panel. Our first panelist is going to be George Dorsey, GSO manager. And George is going to talk to us, unless he's changed his mind, about evolution through service. George?
Thank you. My name's George, and I'm an alcoholic. And this is my fourth. I want to say good evening to all of the twisted serpents and necessary evils. This is my fourth intergroup seminar, and I'm having this dangerous feeling that I feel so at home and relaxed and comfortable with this group that I may get as goofy and unguarded as I am at my home group, which really I shouldn't do. Helen asked me I asked her what she wanted me to do next, so I give the talk you gave in Baltimore. Well, I didn't tape it. Well, I really can't give the talk I gave in Baltimore. I think I had specific topics to talk about, which is always a good idea when you ask me to talk, because I do follow orders and stick to the topic. It's when I'm given sort of a general license to talk that I get in trouble. But, last Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday of this past week, I take Wednesday just to split the difference. I celebrated 34 years of sobriety, but those of you who are in San Diego, on the stage on Saturday night, it occurred to me that exactly 40 years to the day prior to that interesting meeting we had at Jack Murphy Stadium on Saturday night, I had bailed myself out of Lincoln Heights Jail in Los Angeles, and I had remembered a conversation that I'd had with a drinking friend of mine who was an AA member, but he was on sabbatical when we had the conversation. In other words, he was drunk. But he was trying to carry the AA message to me drunk. And he did plant the seed, because this is 40 years ago, and the AA was not anywhere nearly as well known as it is today. And I had heard that Jack, my friend, was sober in Chicago again. And I thought, if they can help somebody like him. It's weird, and he was alcoholic. He was the alcoholic's alcoholic. And so I don't want to start telling this story, but the fact that the Pope is in New York reminded me of it. I was sitting the morning after a party with Jack having a little of the hair of a dog that bit us the night before. And there were three of us in the room, but suddenly there was a fourth person in the room with us. Jack was having a conversation with the Pope. It's about Catholic that he was, and that was a little scary. I've got to admit that was sort of frightening. But anyway, so I bailed myself out of jail, and I looked up Alcoholics Anonymous in the phone book, and I called a delegate from the Southern California area, and then I called the General Service Office. And if you believe that, you are not you don't know AA. I found the number of the Los Angeles Central Office. And it was within walking distance, which was fortunate because while I was out of jail, my car was still impounded since I had had a confrontation with a police car. And the car was a little damaged and was in the impound yard, so I was able to walk the Central Office. And had on a Saturday, July 4th weekend, we had a 3-hour conversation with a man who seemed very elderly at the time. He was probably younger then than I am now, and that began the journey that's led me to where I am tonight. And I considered if the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, I have been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous for 40 years. I've only been sober 34, but I never left. I've been continuously, and was very active and devoted to the central offices in Los Angeles. I was on their 12-step call list, and for a couple of years sobriety, I moved to San Francisco, and tremendously active there, starting groups, and just prodigious 12-step where I went on their 12-step call list. Incidentally, I stayed on that list for 29 years until I moved to New York. And the experiences that I have had as a result of being on the 12-step lists of the Los Angeles and San Francisco Bay Area central offices have been just as memorable and just as important to me. The friends that I've made, the dangerous and hair-raising and humorous experiences that I've been to. You know, it was pretty exciting being up there on the podium at Jack Murphy Stadium on Saturday night, but it was no more exciting than being chased down the back stairs of a Tenderloin hotel with a guy at 11 o'clock at night with a guy who had a knife in his hand. That's pretty exhilarating too. Those are experiences I had as a result of being involved in Intergroup and Central Office work. While in San Francisco, in those days in both the LA and San Francisco office, and on the Intergroup committees, you had the real AA heavyweights, not in general service. The highly respected old-timers in those days were involved in Central Office support committees. And the Central Office secretaries were the father and mother figures in that part of the country. And if the group had a problem with traditions, they didn't look for their delegate. They didn't know they had a delegate. And they often didn't bother to write to GSO. They called these old founders, old-timers, people that went back to the AA in the 40s that were occupying the Central Office positions. And their word was law. I mean, they just handed down edicts. They didn't do what we try to do, just share experience. They told them what was right and what was wrong, and everybody says, okay. That's they went along with it. But we had a wonderful woman named Harriet, and she wanted to get me involved in service because her predecessor, a guy named Jack I, had been there so long, he didn't feel it was necessary to have an Central Office committee anymore. he just had his vast network of friends who would get him money or do anything he wanted to, and he just tapped into this huge network that he had to get anything done, and he didn't need a committee. Well, Harry wanted to get a committee started again, so she was a very shrewd lady, and she tapped in, she found my weakness, and she said, George, she played on my ego, of course. George, with your business experience, you would be a great help if you could be on the Central Service Committee, which is the Central Office Committee. And well, I suppose that I could do that and lend my business knowledge to this operation. when I became involved, and found immediately that they had a club there, about 5 or 6 guys and gals, a couple of gals, that went back, their sobriety went back to the 40s and very early 50s, and they just ran everything, and they sort of rotated periodically, but one would rotate off for a year or two, and then rotate right back on, and a couple more would rotate off, and they just kept it sort of rolling without any real rotation. So I got a bunch of, we call ourselves young rebels and young Turks, and we decided that we were going to throw the rascals out. And we did. We got rid of them. And some of them were wonderful, dear people. Some of them had a resentment for years, but I think I made peace with all of them eventually before they passed on. We just shoved them out. So then we immediately became the old guy of the club. Then after not too long a period, a new bunch of young Turks, young rebels came along, and they were determined to throw us out. And throw us out they did, of course. So there I was with nothing to do except make a lot of 12-step calls and start new groups, the usual things I've been doing before. But I kind of missed this activity at a higher level, and I'd heard about this general service, and a friend of mine who we thought was otherwise a very urbane and sophisticated fellow and a good AA member and a wonderful 12-stepper, sponsor had this eccentricity. So he was interested in general service, and we couldn't understand it because that was not something that we would expect someone like Norm with his urbanity and sophistication to be interested in. That simply should not have been his thing. The general service was kind of an organization for AA members who would ordinarily be members of the Lions Club or the Kiwanis Club. And they didn't want to do that anymore because they drink too much at the Lions Club and the Kiwanis Club. So we got this thing called general service going so that they could have meetings just like the Lions Club and the Kiwanis Club and not drink. And, they were nice people, and it helped them stay sober, but it didn't really have anything to do with what Alcoholics Anonymous was all about, which was carrying the message. But Norm talked me into becoming involved. And I will tell you very truthfully, I didn't like it too much. I didn't like it for a long, long time. And looking back, in retrospect, as we like to say redundantly, the thing that puzzles me is why I hung around. But I think I was learning things. Now, I was very upset because I'd had this vast experience at the central office level, but they had some ideas that just didn't make any sense to me. And one of them was the right of decision, that if we send a delegate to New York, we endow them with a right of decision. And I couldn't understand that. I mean, we were the bosses, and we got to tell them what to do. They don't get to make any decisions. We certainly didn't run the central office committee that way. We didn't believe the secretary, the paid workers, should get to make any decisions. So they had this strange idea. And then they had another strange idea, and that was the right of participation. That if you had somebody gave somebody a job, they should have the right to participate. Even though you made the decisions about the job, they should have the right to participate in how those decisions were made. And that was unheard of. I mean, the way we ran the central office committee, if the guy running the office or gal running the office held their hand up and say, well, wait till we finish taking care of this. And in general service, I didn't seem to believe in that. And then they had something called the right of appeal. If we made a decision, somebody could come around at the next meeting and say, I didn't like the decision, I want to reconsider. What do you mean you didn't like the decision? We made the decision. The good conscience spoke, go away. And so they had all these strange ideas that I had not learned being a driving force at the level of the Central Office Committee. But I must say none of my predecessors on that committee had believed in any of those things either. They were the good old timers who knew best about everything, and that seemed to me to be a very decent sort of way to run things. Once I felt that I knew best. But slowly but surely, my experience in general service began to disabuse me of some of these things that I mentioned: the right of decision, the right of participation. and the right of appeal are three of the basic principles in the concepts that Bill wrote. And of course, at this stage of the game, but long before now, I've come to believe that they're essential to the operation of any AA service, and that we can get along for a while without them, but we do so at our peril to a large degree, that when we understand these principles, AA service works a great deal better. But then I think maybe one of the other things that attracted me was that I could really change I could behave differently in general service, and even in service at the central office level, than I would working with a newcomer, making a 12-step call, or being in my home group with a lot of new people. There was a forum, I think 1990, about a year ago, not a forum, a regionalist service event in a region in which there were a lot of people who were very unhappy about a lot of things that they felt had gone wrong at the level of the General Service Board and the General Service Office in connection with issues with which I'm sure many of you are familiar. Well, somehow the people writing the program kind of had some very negative panels on the program, and one of them was kind of a list of these things that some people were upset about, and they had three panelists. The last one was supposed to talk about what is responsible and who is responsible. And I think the people who were playing the program were very disappointed in what he said. And as he got up, and he really got me thinking. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what's responsible." He said, "It's alcoholic suspicion, and it's alcoholic fear, and it's alcoholic need to control, and it's the unresolved anger, unresolved alcoholic anger." And this resonated with hundreds of people that were there, but it really struck me, because as I thought about it, I realized that in the course of my service life, I brought with me all of those little demons that I have in my alcoholic personality: the suspicion, the alcoholic paranoia, the alcoholic fear, and insecurity. That we're really not as good as we think we are, and we might be wrong. If I perish the thought, we might possibly be wrong in the unresolved alcoholic anger. Now, I have always been able to keep that under control when working with newcomers and working as a sponsor. I may get a little impatient, but that blind alcoholic anger stays under control when I work in recovery. But when I got into service, it found a natural channel where it seemed like it was okay, cut loose. Everybody else is doing it. Why not? And then, of course, in terms of alcoholic need to control, that. Look who I'm talking to. I think we all understand that pretty well. And the only thing that I can say is that I caught on to myself, and I had wonderful, wonderful mentors and teachers. I came to the General Service Conference as a delegate in 1975, determined to rattle the cages as hard as I could. And I thought that anybody who worked in the field should be barred from any service position, if not actually thrown out of the fellowship. And I just had all kinds of things where I was going to turn the place upside down. But people like Dr. Jack Norris, who's a non-alcoholic, at my first conference, Dr. Jack came up to me, and Dr. Jack was chairman of the General Service Board for 16 years, a true historic figure, extremely handsome, distinguished man. Came up to me and said, George, would you care to take a walk with me? I'd like to talk to you. So, again, I thought, well, certainly, Dr. Jack. The great man wants my counsel. I see the least I can do. And so we headed out on Madison Avenue outside of the Roosevelt Hotel. Dr. Jack's a tall man. He was taking long strides. He said nothing, and he didn't look at me. He just walked around, sort of half running to keep up with him. And we got about 2 blocks from the hotel, and he stopped, and he turned, and he looked at me, and he said, young man, the only thing I wanted to say to you is that it's up to you to rise to the level of Alcoholics Anonymous, not drag Alcoholics Anonymous down to your level, at which point he turned around and walked back to the Roosevelt. And I looked for a hole. I wanted to take a plane home. But, Dr. Jack was wonderful. I'd catch his eye later on in the conference, and he'd give me a kind of a little small, kindly smile. And then another teacher was Milton Maxwell, another non-alcoholic who became chairman of the board when I served as chairman the 4 years that I served as a trustee in the General Service Board. And Milton's genuine humility, his lack of any hidden agenda, his spiritual qualities were such that my admiration and respect and love for Milton was so powerful that I would have cut off my hand rather than do something that would have made Milton disappointed in me. He made me a better man than I am because of his qualities. He made me rise above these alcoholic demons that still lurk around my back from time to time. And another great mentor was Bob Hitchens, who was my predecessor as the manager of the General Service Office. I think that all through this long experience, and wondering why I stuck around and went on to be delegate, and went on to be trustee, now I'm general manager, ego, of course, plays a part in it, but not that much. I mean, I've had a life. I've had quite a life outside of service, and when I rotated as trustee, I was very happy. I didn't miss it. I felt going back to a much more private and quiet and low-key AA life was just wonderful for me. If I got out to 3 or 4 service events or conventions a year, it was fine. And just going to the group and looking for people and watching people develop and grow. I was my AA life was very, very happy and very, very comfortable. I was very grateful to find that I had not become in the least addicted to having a high AA profile. In fact, I kind of enjoyed not having one. Of course, I blew all that 2.5 years ago. But I think I stuck around in general service particularly because I kept learning things. And in some way, I felt I was becoming a better person and a better alcoholic, frequently as a result of having made some horrendous mistakes and learning from them. And I learned a lot about Alcoholics Anonymous now on a worldwide basis. It's tremendously exciting. And Vinny will talk a bit tomorrow about some of the things happening around the world, but first around the country, first around California, then around the country, and now around the world. It's to see the power and the breadth and what this fellowship has done and what it means on a worldwide basis is an experience that you just don't have if you combine your life to go into your home group and working with newcomers. Although that's equally gratifying. And then I learned a lot about other people. I would go to these service meetings, and I would get so, I never suffered from depressions. I've been sober 34 years. I've never had 2 weeks where I had a very serious depression. What I suffer from is being restless, irritable, and discontented. And I'm that quite often. As the people who work with me will attest. I can't claim that I don't have a problem with being restless, irritable, and discontented. And boy, would I get restless, irritable, and discontented at service meetings. And I would hear these people that I think, oh God, completely different backgrounds, completely different educations, contributing to service, and then start to appreciate the qualities that they brought to what we were doing together that I didn't have. And that was humbling in the best sense of the word. And that has happened to me beginning over 20 years ago, and continues to happen to me to this day. And then last of all, I've learned about myself the hard way by making mistakes. And coming to recognize these little alcoholic demons that I still have carried into my sobriety, and learning how to deal with them. Of course, I rotated from everything and had a lot of sobriety and was pretty well respected in Northern California, and was making a lot of money and had a life that was very, very comfortable. In fact, it had never been better. Life had never been better. And then I came to New York, and as I said in Baltimore, grew horns and became a New Yorker. But this learning and growing, I don't like to use the word growing after 34 years of sobriety. If I thought that I was continuing to grow after 34 years of sobriety, and that I've been growing through 34 years, it might suggest a stature that I don't like to think that I have achieved. But here I am, fairly late in life, on a job where my personal, individual AA program is being challenged on a daily basis. Complacency with respect to my program is impossible doing what I'm doing. I have to work my program harder now than I did before I took this position, and I suspect that's true for many of you who are occupying central office jobs. It requires a deeper effort and a deeper understanding of our recovery programs just in order to do a decent job and to survive as recovering alcoholics. And really, I'm grateful for that. I think it's wonderful that I got shaken out of my happy complacency in some ways. That here I am at this stage of length of sobriety and this number of years and this kind of record through the year 34 years that I'm still challenged. I'm absolutely challenged with respect to my own personal qualities and respect to my own ability to work the program. Niles Peebles was a guy who worked at the office for a short time and then wrote the book Dr. Bob and the Old Timers, Good Old Timers, which is a wonderful book, and it's full of humor and love and a lot of wonderful understated wisdom. And then we asked, I was on the AWS board at the time, it was about 15 years ago, I think, we asked Niles to write a biography of Bill. We had the Dr. Bob book first. And Niles got started on it, did a lot of research, read a lot of letters in the archives, talked to a lot of old-timers, and then he became terminally ill, and he wrote a letter, which I remember to this day. I don't know if Vinny remembers it, but he said that he would reluctantly have to give up the project because of his illness, and that he was terminal, and it was a wonderful spiritual letter. Then he went on with a paragraph that's kind of haunted me and came back to me flying down here yesterday. He said, I'm not sure that even if I were physically able to, I would want to continue working on the book. Referring to his research and all of the really horrible letters that AA members who really had received this tremendous gift from Bill had written him. And the interviews with some of the surviving old-timers at that time, 15 years ago, who were not friends of Bill, and who used these interviews as an excuse to drag out all the red herrings and the skeletons in the closet and settle all of their old scores with Bill. And so here we have this man who gave us all this gift, and while he served AA, he was frequently crucified for the things that he did. And several months after I went to work in the office, I was sitting talking to Vinny and complaining, sniveling about some of the things that were being directed to us. And she said, well, you know, Bill didn't get over his 11-year depression until he quit working for alcoholics. And I'm not sure that's right. I guess it is. And, you know, that's been very comforting to me. and looking back at Niles' letter 15 years ago, that brings that back. I think that this is something that's going to go with being a trusted servant, and particularly being a special worker, or as Bill called us, Bill says even the charitably disposed referred to us as necessary evils. And I think certainly at this stage of my life, and my sobriety, and my career, I don't particularly like to be the target of the kind of abuse that I get and you get, but we have to accept that it goes with the territory. And it started with Bill, and certainly us lesser mortals can deal with it and understand it if it was directed at someone like Bill, who gave us all this tremendous gift. And so how do we deal with it? I've always been fascinated, and when I'm not so busy, I'm going to really try and understand it better. And I've spent hours and hours with people like Bob Hitchens and Dr. Jack, who knew Bill so well, talking about. I never got the answer to this question: how Bill could maintain, he never responded in anger. And I don't know how he did it. Did he turn it inward? Was that the reason for the depression? I don't know, but you can look at all of his violent, irrational criticism that was directed towards Bill, and he never responded in kind. And I think that's truly remarkable, because he was a very, very human guy. And he learned or drew upon some source of strength that enabled him to do that. And if he had not been able to do that, we probably wouldn't have anything like the kind of unity in Alcoholics Anonymous today that we have today, and we might not even have any Alcoholics Anonymous today if Bill had fought back the way people fought at him. So I try to remind myself of that as we sit in the office, and as this is something I think I said in Baltimore that some of you have reminded me that when we get this sort of thing, we try to explain what we've done, we try to explain it non-defensively, we never attack. And boy, that calls on me to do something that's unnatural for this particular alcoholic. And that is an unnatural act for me not to counterattack. I'm a natural advocate, and I have to completely shut down my own natural advocacy if I am going to perform and handle the job that I have in the way that I think it should be handled. So we try never attack, and we try not to be defensive. We try to explain. That's the mantra: never attack, never defend, try to explain. Now, I'm going to close by reading something that I just like. That's why I'm going to read it. I was at a heritage meeting in Long Beach in mid-Southern California a couple of weeks ago, and it was wonderful. They had 6 old-timers with over 40, including my sponsor of 37 years. No, I've only been sober 34, so there's a story there. And they were great, cheerful, hearty, positive old-timers, and they bitterly disappointed a vast number of people who came expecting to hear how AA had gone to the dogs, because they feel that AA should be returned to some kind of old-time religion that, as far as I know, never really existed. And I've been around quite a while and knew all the people that started in Southern California. And these old-timers got up and they laughed and giggled. You know, they started out by reading the original manuscript of chapter 5, which has such statements as, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions." well, some of these kids want to know who and when, with the wonderful alcoholic fear and paranoia that I was describing, this was changed. What sinister plot changes things from direction to there? Well, fortunately, I didn't have to answer that at all. The old-timers got up and laughed. They thought that was very funny. So we never put that. That was never in the book. We knew that wouldn't work. You can't give a drunk directions. What are you talking about? and you know, the people that ask him, well, what about A-Day? A-Day's pretty good. You know, there's some things that have changed. But country's changed. LA has changed. Southern California has changed. Culture's changed. There's been some changes, but it's pretty good. Maybe better than it was. You don't know how nuts we were in the old days. We did terrible. And so it was an absolutely wonderful, upbeat meeting, but I think a certain element people went home kind of disappointed. But one of the old-timers gave me a letter. It's dated December 5th, 1941, which I'll read and then sit down. It was signed by two. I knew four of the signatories. One of them was like a father to me, Al Marino, just died not too many years ago. And two of them are names who were in AA Comes of Age. Bill considered them the founders of this enormous fellowship that blossomed in Southern California. It's to Irma L. Irma has probably been dead for many, many, many years, but it's addressed. The letter uses her full name, but I will protect her anonymity, even though she's probably long gone. And as John Grant in our office said when I showed him the letter, that Irma must have been some piece of work. to Irma L. in Gramercy Place in Los Angeles. Dear Mrs. L., at a meeting of the Executive Committee to the Los Angeles Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, held December 4th, 1941, it was decided that your attendance at group meetings was no longer desired until certain explanations and plans for the future were made to the satisfaction of this committee. This action has been taken for reasons which should be most apparent to you. It was decided that, should you so desire, you may appear before members of this committee and state your attitude. This opportunity will be afforded you between now and December 15th, 1941. You may communicate with us at the above address by that date. In case you do not wish to appear, we shall consider the matter closed and that you are terminated. The A is still pretty good.
Thank you, George. I neglected to mention to you before with the administrative announcements that you were expected to take copious notes because there is going to be an exam after these are finished. That was the suggestion of Helen. Our next speaker, not you, Helen. The GSO liaison to central offices is our next speaker. And I really don't know what Helen Turnquist is going to talk about, but she has something exciting that she wants to convey to you. So, Helen, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. My name is Helen Turnquist, and I'm an alcoholic. And I have the pleasure of currently serving as the GSO liaison to Central and Intergroup offices. I think Helen R. had asked me, there are a number of Helens here, by the way, this weekend, and I think it's the first affair I've ever gone to in AA with been more than me as Helen. So there are a couple of Helen R's, a Helen T, and I think one other Helen. So all of us kind of turn around when you say our names. Helen R. from Atlanta had asked me to talk about the relationship of GSO to central offices, and I guess in some way I'll get around to that, but George stimulated my thought processes to a lot of things. First of all, I wanted to say that, the intergroup offices, all of you central offices, all of you who work in them, are really kind of the frontline people. And I'm forever grateful to the New York Intergroup because that was the office that ultimately ended up saving my life. I woke up one morning, and I will share this with you, just to give you a little feel for who I am as a drunk. I had awakened one Wednesday morning, February 15th, 1974. It's forever engraved in my mind. And I poured a drink, and I called in sick to work, and then I sat down to decide what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I knew that if I left New York that day and quit my job that day, then my life would certainly improve. Now, the first drink always gave me wisdom into a problem, or insight rather, and the second drink I always got tremendous wisdom into a problem. And so as I began sipping on that second glass of scotch, the idea occurred to me that I could join the armed forces. That I'm a registered nurse by education, and that meant I would automatically be an officer. And they had officers' clubs and happy hour and bases all over the world, and I could go swear in that day and find myself either in Europe by that evening or Hawaii, and that was just fine with me. So the second phone call I made after calling in sick was to that recruiting station that's in the middle of Times Square, but nobody answered the phone. You know, it's as though they all knew an active drunk was calling, and they kind of all went out for coffee at that time. Now, the seed of AA had been planted in my mind by a shrink I had been seeing, who said to me one day that he believed that I was an alcoholic, and that I was wasting my time and my money by visiting him twice a week, and that I really should hook up with these folks in Alcoholics Anonymous. So the seed had been planted, and you know, we say in AA that all we can do is to plant the seed, and when it bears fruit, will be in God's time and not necessarily ours. And this was in November when he planted the seed, and in February I laid back on my bed and just started to sob when the Army didn't answer, and the Navy didn't answer, and all of the other branches didn't answer, and AA came to mind. And I looked in the phone book, and there was a number for Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, like George, it wasn't the delegate for Southeast New York, and it wasn't the General Service Office. There was a number that said Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called that. A man answered the phone, and that reaffirmed what my idea was about AA, and that it was all little old men. And so I said to him, I said, I think I have a drinking problem, and I'd like to speak with a woman. And he said, I'll have someone get right back to you. And lo and behold, that's indeed what happened. I wish I could tell you I got sober that night, or the next day, or the day after that. But I met with someone from AA, and when it was time for me to really throw in the towel, I had her number and I called. And the New York Intergroup made arrangements for me to go away for detox. The woman said to me when she asked me about my drinking, how much I had been drinking and had I been using any pills. And I said, yeah, well, I drink about a quart of scotch a day. And I said, you know, I get the shakes, so I take a little Valium to stop the shakes. And she said, well, how much? And I said, I don't know, 5 or 6 10-milligram tablets a day, you know. And she said, well, I think it might be best if you go into the hospital for a few days. And I thought she meant to the hospital where I was on the staff. And I said, I can't go there in this condition, you know. And, you know, it was so wonderful in AA because she said to me, oh, no, my dear. She said, we have special places for people like you. And, you know, she began to nip away at that arrogance that we have a tendency to have when we're kind of in our cups and all. And she called New York Intergroup. And they made the arrangements, and I went out to Long Island to this drying out place. And all they did there was observe us, and they gave us medication for a couple of days, and AA members came in and talked with us and told us their story. And they gave us hope and they gave us help. And when I got out, I went home, and when I opened my mailbox, I was there for 7 days, and when I opened my mailbox, there was one envelope that fell out that didn't have a window in it. And I'm sure that you all can imagine what those windowed envelopes were. You know, I hadn't paid bills in a long time. But there was one, and it was an address. I didn't know what it meant, but when I opened it, there was a New York City meeting directory, and there were 3 AA pamphlets. And no sooner had I gotten into my apartment than the phone rang, and it was a woman in my neighborhood who wanted to take me to a meeting that night. And that had all been set up by the Intergroup office in New York. And so their procedures and the people there really got me on the path towards sobriety, and I'm forever grateful to them. We heard a lot of talk in meetings when I was new, and it helped many of us stay around for a while. And that is, when you got 90 days of sobriety, you could answer the phones at Intergroup. And boy, did we want to do that. I mean, that sounded like just fantastic, to go and try and carry this message that we had gotten to another alcoholic. And I indeed did do that. I did not get sober for very long that first time, and it took another drunk to get me back to AA. But when I came back, thank God, after just a few weeks, I got a sponsor and did all of the things you people told me to do. And when I was 90 days sober, I went and answered those phones at Intergroup, and it was the best time of my life. It was the best time of my life. I met friends there that are still my friends today, and we had laughter there, and we had fun there. And to me, that's what sobriety is all about. I love coming to Intergroup seminars. It's my third one, as I've said. My first one was in Toronto, and then the second one was in Memphis, and now this one. And I can recall very vividly when the first Intergroup seminar was being planned, and I was in Benny's office, and we were talking, and she was telling me about it. And I said, you know, that's really great. I said, this is a wonderful idea. I didn't know how wonderful it really was until I heard about the first one. And the coming together of all of you. It's like the drunk who comes into AA, and we speak the language of the heart, and we say, well, I felt that way, and I did that, and you automatically all of a sudden feel that you're not unique, and that you're not different, and that you're not alone. And I think that's what happened at this first Intergroup seminar, where you came together and you saw that your problems that you had in your office, the communication with maybe some of your service people was not so hot. And you wondered, am I alone in this muck and mire? Until you found out that you weren't. And when we're able to sit down and to discuss, and we find out that we're not unique and that we're not different, isn't it then that things begin to get better as we begin to get a little bit better? I can recall vividly at one Intergroup seminar, and I don't want to single out some people, but it struck me, and I think it was at Toronto, and Indy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you talking about the problems that you had with the service structure in your area, and how there was just a lot of animosity and anger, and that the delegate didn't want anything to do with the central office. And there were loads of problems. And I thought, where is all this AA love and service? I said, you know, we're all trying to carry the message here, and what is all of this anger? And then the next thing I knew is that Memphis was having an Intergroup seminar. And I saw how the changes have come about and what has happened between the office and the service structure. Not only there, but in many other places as well. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. George said to share a little bit about how I went to GSO as well, and I will, because it in a way is very similar to your story. I was not looking for a job at GSO. I had no idea that I would end up there. As I said, I'm a nurse by profession. I was working in my profession, but I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, you know. I just didn't know what, I knew there was something for me, but I didn't know what it was. And my sponsor just shared, she's a wonderful woman, and she shared a lot of wonderful things with me, and she had a lot of wisdom. And I guess one of the things that she shared with me that stuck and has worked in my life then as it works in my life today, and that is that to have a belief that God has a path for me, and when I'm ready, it will be made known. And so I was, you know, walking along this little happy path at the hospital saying, I don't want to do this anymore. And I ran into someone from the office. They had heard me talk at a meeting and share about the questions that I had in my life and what was I going to do with the rest of my life. And she said, you know, there's nothing opening at GSO. Why don't you apply? Well, I wasn't too sure about that. But I said, I'll think about it. And then I think a few days later, I got a call from the office asking me to go for an interview. And I went and I did that. You know, as you say to people, just take the action. Just put one foot in front of the other with the action and leave the results up to the God of your understanding. And I had never practiced that before, although I said it a lot. I never had the opportunity to really practice that. And indeed, that's what I did. And I think it was a few weeks later that I got a call asking me to join the staff. And this has been a real joy for me. But I must say that it was quite an eye-opening experience, because I went there thinking about serving this fabulous fellowship and meeting these wonderful, happy, joyful AAs from all over the place. I think I had been there about a week, and that bubble just burst. It just burst. There were a whole lot of letters that came up from the South Florida region at that time, seemed to be angry at the office. And I got a gander at some of those letters, and I just said, my God, what is the matter? I said, the sun has baked their brains down there, you know. Or somebody had put some evil pills into their coffee at meetings. I mean, they were just dancing all over the place. And so that was my first eye-opening experience. But the other eye-opening experience I had, George alluded to, and that was that no one at the office wanted to retaliate to these people. They did not react in kind, but what they did was to respond in using the principles of our program. And I began to pick up a lot of things in working at GSO, because I went there at that time when I was 4.5 years sober. And so it was quite an eye-opening experience, and it certainly helped me to begin to put principles into my life. And indeed, it encouraged me to go to even more meetings than I was already going to. But what happened is that I saw change occur by not reacting in kind to people, but by responding, in learning to communicate with people and not talk at people. And that was unique and different to me. And so it's been that kind of journey for me all the time at GSO. Everyone seems to think that the office is some legislative body, that we send down edicts of you have to do this and you have to do that. The other day I got a phone call from the secretary of an area informing us that the treasurer of the area had absconded with the funds. And this person was on parole, and so they were going to contact the person's parole officer, and they were really going to do it upright, you know, and they had a couple of lawyers working on this, and they were going to do what, you know, you would think people would do when something like that happens. And I began to talk about the warranties of the 12th concept. If you don't know what the warranties are, if you don't know what the concepts are, I encourage you to pick up a copy of the service manual. And if you read nothing else, read the 12th concept, because it's very clear in there that we're not punitive in AA. And when I read a paragraph from Warranty 5, this woman said, that's just what I needed to hear. Just what I needed to hear. And I've got it, and I'm going to take it to everybody. And no, I don't think we will inform the parole officer, but we will begin to pray for this person. There was a trustee who once said to me that nobody comes to AA because they're well. And it takes some a little longer than others, maybe, to catch on to this life of sobriety that we have. But the office is not a judicial office, and it's not a legislative body. What we do is to carry out those things that the conference, which is the voice of our fellowship, has asked us to do on behalf of you. We don't do 12-step work, but we produce a lot of things to enable you all to do that. What is GSO's relationship to central offices? I think it's the same as to any other AA entity, and that is to be of service to you, to provide materials to you, to provide the shared AA experience that we have in the office to you when you call and request it. I think if there's one thing I've found, I've been at the office now 17 years, if there's one thing that I have found to be a common thread in the fellowship is miscommunication. I think that miscommunication leads to the fear and to the paranoia and to the suspicion. And we, my goodness, produce tons of paper. I call GSO the AA paper factory. I've never seen so much paper in my life. I said that we could save a whole forest of trees if we cut down a little bit on some of the paper. But we have some wonderful service pieces that I think can be of great benefit to you for use in your own areas. I think that we can provide it to you, and you in turn, you get more members into your offices probably than some of the area committees get at their meetings, at their assembly meetings. Certainly more than we get in the office. And if you have knowledge of this information, then that indeed is a stepping stone for them to learn what some of these things are. So that one of the things I do on my assignment is to be on top, if you will, of all of the service material that we produce. We have a sheet out called Service Material Available from GSO. I often say that the group services assignment came about when the office would say, we have to produce thus and so. And they didn't know really what other assignment it belonged to, so it went into something called group services. So as a result of that, group services covers everything from A to Z and the kitchen sink. Everything we don't know what to do with today goes into group services. So it's a variety of material that we put out. Service material is not material that is necessarily produced by a conference committee. They may say, gee, why don't you prepare something, but it doesn't have a conference-approved seal on it, or the words on it now, since we no longer have the seal. I have to get my head back into that mode. But some of the things that we produce, the AA anonymity card, which is an announcement for meetings to the public. I believe a lot of you use it for various roundups and conventions and conferences. That's been revised, that card, to include information about not videotaping at AA functions. AA has come of the electronic age. And where we used to get letters into the office or phone calls to the office, things now come in by fax, by email, by car phone, by who knows whatever. but we're getting them all the time. And so we, too, have had to sit down and talk a little bit about all the videotaping that seems to have occurred in different functions. And the trustees' PI committee felt it was now time to add that to the anonymity card as well. We have all kinds of free flyers. We have something called the conference-approved explanatory literature sheet. And I bring that up because I think there were people here today who said there were folks in their area who didn't know about it. And maybe it would be helpful to mail this to you. So I think that what I will do when I get back to the office and after I get a list of all of you who've been here, I'm going to send you a sheet that tells you all of the things that is service material available from GSO. This is all free material. Some of it's in French and Spanish, some in just English, and I think that'll be self-explanatory. But to let you know that we have those things there. So I think that if I were to sum up and say what is the GSO relationship to central offices, or what is the GSO liaison's relation to you all, I would say it's to have an eye and an ear in the office of one person that you can talk with, you can call and ask for things, or to say, gee, what can we do about whatever? And I would share with you, just as I would share with any AA member who wrote in, that AA experience has shown. And that's how we begin a lot of our letters at the office. We don't say, this is what you have to do. This is what AA experience has shown. And then it is left, of course, up to your own group conscience of whatever entity is responsible for your office and whatnot. I had so many notes here tonight. I was thinking that over the past 2 weeks I've been trying to really write up a talk. But I think that the better talks are given when you're in the midst of people and you can pick up the vibes from being there, and otherwise they can become very cut and dry and people drone on and you begin to nod out, and fall asleep and it gets all dull and the rest of it. But we have some wonderful staff at the office when I went to work there, some of whom have retired. And I know that 2 of the retirees, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, I know at least one, when she retired from the office, immediately went back to the Intergroup office and began answering phones on a volunteer basis. And I believe 2 of them were doing it, but I don't know if Ann is still able to do it. So 2 of them are still doing it. Beth just celebrated 40-some-odd years of sobriety a couple of weeks ago, and Ann has like 49 years of sobriety, and they're trudging right on down to the New York Intergroup to carry the message to that drunk who still calls in. AA is in a very exciting phase, I think, right now, and I'm not going to steal Benny's thunder at all, but it is interesting to me, and it certainly was interesting to me when I was a newcomer, that I didn't know how AA worked. And I had lots of questions to ask about. I wanted to know about this group of people that I was going to turn myself into and who seemed to be very eloquent in telling me how to run my life now. They said my way wasn't working, but their way would, So I wanted to know about these people. And I was very fortunate with my sponsor, who began to give me a lot of literature to read. And she gave me the book AA Comes of Age. And many of you who've heard my story, I say that it's not the big book that saved my life. It was the book Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age that really saved my life. Because that book made me want to become, a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was the book that showed me the miracle that we have in this program. And I am seeing today AA exploding in places where one might think it would never work because of whatever reasons. And I'm reminded of a priest that came to our office a number of years ago. He was a missionary, and he's a member of AA, and he had been sent to Kathmandu, Nepal, to do his work. Well, Kathmandu, I gather, is just a haven for all kinds of illegal activities, and it certainly is not this spiritual city that one might think up in the Himalayas, because I gather there's a lot of drinking and a lot of drugging and a lot of other things. So he became a lone member in AA. And he would write us wonderful letters, and he would talk about trying to carry this message to the natives who drank some brew that they called palm wine, and he was not having very much success. But then we didn't hear from Father Pat for a while, and then one day he turned up at the office, and he was sent home on kind of a relief, I guess, to come home back to the Marino mission here for a while. And a little R&R, as you might call it. And he shared with us that they now had the beginning of a small group in Kathmandu. And he said sitting around that table, there was a Hindu, a Brahmin, a Catholic, an outcast, and there was one other. And he said, normally these are people who would not mix together. They would not have anything to do with each other. And he said to see them sitting around this same table at this little meeting that we have in Kathmandu, sharing their experience, strength, and hope, well, it just brought tears to my eyes. So that there are many alcoholics out there. There are many of them. And I think that for me it's important to remember that it's not only the message that we carry of AA, but certainly my working at the General Service Office, and maybe you all at your central offices, it's how we carry that message. And do I carry it with love and kindness, or do I attempt to beat people over the head with it? But I do not sit at GSO, George, and take abuse from some of the folks who call in. And I will tell them that, the real angry alcoholics who call and for a variety of reasons. And I say, honey, I do. I picked that up from a Southerner that we had as a staff member at the office. I never used it before. I was around her 5 minutes, and then I was talking like her, And I said, honey, they don't pay me enough to take your anger. We did not cause whatever it is you're angry about. So why don't we just share like two alcoholics with each other, and let's see what your reason is for calling up here and how we can be of help to you. And it's amazing how that will work. When I don't react in kind, I say it in a very loving, now honey, It's my sponsor says that what I'm doing is putting on my nurse's cap and treating them like some of the patients that I used to have in my psych affiliation. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. In closing, I want to say that I love to come to the seminars, and I'm delighted to be your liaison now, because it's different from any other function I go to. And it's different because you all experience many of the same things that we experience as staff members at GSO. And we can sit and have some laughs over it, and we can talk with each other. We can learn from each other, as I have learned today from any number of you. There are lots of things that are going on as far as GSO is concerned, things that we are in the process of producing. I'm getting ready next month to start with some people to do the 12 and 12 in American Sign Language. And as you know, we have the big book on videotape in American Sign Language. And now we're going to be doing the 12 and 12. So those are the kinds of things that we do, which will enable you to carry the message to the alcoholic in your area. There's loads more that GSO does, but there's a wonderful chapter in the service manual on it, and I encourage you to read that. Along with the 12 concepts, the 12th, because I think you get a lot of the calls that we get, and I think it can be extremely helpful to you. So with that, I'm going to close and say thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Does anybody really know what makes an effective central office? That's one of your exam questions. So, to give you some insight into the answer to this thought-provoking question, the central office manager from Walnut Creek, California, Terry Bolender. Terry?
Thank you. My name is Terry Bellender, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm the office manager from the area that probably should be called Drugs or Us, because we have 5 central offices in the San Francisco Bay Area, all with paid staff. We have 3 or 4 others with volunteers. And so we really have a downpour like you've had here recently with Opal of drugs. And I wondered why I've stayed at the office, both as a volunteer and as an office manager, for so many years. And I think it's because when I got sober, I missed the drama. And one Monday morning, I walked into, it took me a long time to get just a little better. I walked into central office, and I said, I don't think I can do this. I've only been sober 8 months, but I know you're desperate for help. And so I could answer the phone this morning and maybe help you. 5 years later, Monday morning, which is a very exciting time, a lot of drama then, I was still answering the phone. And the first week I was there, a friend of mine had come in, that had encouraged me and told me, you're not going to stay sober unless you get into service to take this job. She was sitting there having a cup of coffee and sort of overseeing me. And the phone rang, and this woman said in a very calm voice to me, I cut my wrist, and I think my sponsor is going to really be upset about this, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to tell her, but I need her phone number. And I said, well, we don't give out phone numbers. And so she was very calm, though, and I said, but I know her, and I'll give her a call, so give me the number where you are. So as I hung up, I looked at my friend, and I said, you don't suppose she just did that? And she said, just did what? And I said, cut her wrist. So fortunately, I knew her sponsor. I called her. She called the woman. She had indeed just cut her wrist. And after that, I had the Messiah complex working the desk. I had to save everybody that called. Whatever your problem was, you needed a room, you wanted a job, I went from one crazy thing to another. I just wrote a note to the desk minders about not doing that sort of thing. But it's changed over the years, but there's always been something exciting, and I've never done a job of service in AA, and I've meddled in almost everything except H&I, including general service, that I've loved, like answering the phone at the central office. There's nothing like that thrill of talking to an alcoholic calling for the very first time. I remember one day, it was late in the evening, and this woman called, and it was kind of late to try to get the 12-step list out and get a 12-stepper, so I called a friend and said, this woman really needs help, and she sounds very ready, and I think we should go, and I think maybe the 2 of us should take this call. And I said, she's got a lot of pets she's worried about. So off we go, and we get there, and she's an anthropologist, and she's got all these chimpanzees sitting around her house. And we had to, in high chairs. And so I I think this is going to be a very difficult message carrying. Those things make me nervous. Well, we have these people that call, and for years this woman has continued to call. And almost everyone on the 12-step list has met Chico, Curly, and whoever the other ones are. But we warn them, we don't ever give up on anybody, but the message has been carried, and there are primates at this place if you decide to go. So it has gotten a little less exciting lately. We don't have a lot of people calling that are drinking, it seems, with the advent of good detoxes and recovery facilities. And so we had a sweet young thing working there, about a year ago. And she's always said with me, about a year sober and in her early 20s and bright-eyed, said, I've always wanted to work in an office. I think this is going to be really fun. I said, fine, dear. I said to my assistant, Harold likes pretty young girls. I said, you help. I'm going back to my computer. And so Harold got busy with something, and she came back and she knocked on my door, and she said, can I talk to you? And I said, oh, of course. And she said, there's someone on the phone, and I think they've been drinking. So I said to her, well, honey, this isn't Sobriety Anonymous. And I didn't really say it sarcastically because she said, well, I wouldn't know what to say to them. And I said, well, you sit down here and take the call on my phone and think about what you might have liked someone to say to you when you call for the first time. And she said, well, I think I can do that. And so she did a wonderful job, and to get the number and then get a 12-stepper for the person. But, there's just always drama or something around the office. We have our obscene caller. He changes the story a little bit to protect the innocent. And you don't really know it's the same person because the story's a little different until he sort of gets into it. But almost everyone... He starts off so reasonable, but almost every desk monitor, and some of them are really a sharp lot, have bit on this one. And then you have your chronic callers, that have found redial. So you have those over and over and over again. And we have this very wonderful lady that is been very dear to me. In fact, we just lost her. And she's very spiritual, but you don't give her a lot of nonsense. And so she came in one day, and I said, well, we've got this guy on the phone, and he's been calling every 2 seconds all day and part of last evening. And she said, okay. And so, sure enough, he called and hit his happy redial, and so finally she said to him, do you know the Lord's Prayer? And I guess he responded, yes. She said, well, we're going to say it together right now. So they said the Lord's Prayer. He didn't call back as far as I know to this day. So if you have a chronic caller, because that's what we do now. It's sort of almost in the instructions manual. You get one of those, you say the Lord's Prayer. But I think probably the most important thing our office does is it's a safe place where alcoholics can go for information and help, I'm very accessible. If it's AA business, I'm there to talk to people. If they're going to hang around forever, I will say, gee, God, it's been wonderful being with you, but I do have to, and off they go. And most people don't abuse that. And then we have those that kind of hang around trying to get sober, and we put them to get them busy with a job and, stamping receipts or something. And if they're serious about their sobriety, they'll do it. And if they're not, that sends them off. They're gone. But what I think makes an effective office is those things, being able to laugh and being able to share. But I feel that we have been able to do a lot of things well recently is because of our unity. And I know that's kind of maybe an old, tired subject. But believe me, General Service and H&I and Intergroup I mean, it was like the War of the Worlds for a while. It was bad, and we had a chairman who we thought was nuts and idealistic and said, we're going to sit down and talk and have a meeting. We're going to set an agenda, and we're all going to sit down with each other, and we're going to make goodies for him. Yeah. But we did, and these first sessions were almost, I mean, the hostility was terrible. And I, who kind of likes a good scrap, just sat there with my mouth open. I couldn't believe how angry these people were at each other. But they persevered. And one of these people wanted my head. In fact, anybody that didn't want it, he didn't want to talk to. And it was constantly the rumor about what was going on at central office and da-da-da-da-da-da. And, you know, this can change if you really want it to. Recently, we sat down and had an agenda, and we had coffee and cake and hors d'oeuvres together, and it was almost spiritual. It was scary. And there was no discord. We didn't agree on everything. But the man who wanted my head said to me the other day, we've got the best central office in Northern California. And I almost fainted. And it wasn't the best or the fact he said something nice. It was the we that I loved. And I think that is what is so important. In H&I, the chairman comes in. If I'm doing a little something for him, I work for Intergroup. But I try not to turn anybody down that I have the time, because I think it's real important that the AA members in our area think of it as their central office. I see surrounding areas where their forces are divided. One fellowship doesn't like the other one. One county has a north and central office, and a south and a north office, and neither one of them are effective because they don't get along. And who really suffers? And it's the alcoholic that's calling for help. And we have them calling our office because they can't reach the people because they're all too mad to answer their hotline. And some of them have petitioned to join our area and to come under, our affiliation so we can service them. And I don't know that that's the answer. I think what we need to do is try to encourage them to unify, to work toward, the common goal, and to remember that if everybody had been fighting when we made that call, there would have been nobody there answering it. I'm not really concerned about, discord. I think that sometimes controversy is healthy. I think I read where it was born of trouble, that sort of modus operandi for AA. But it's after all is said and done, I think we have to unify, because if we don't, I think AA will die, and I will miss all this wonderful drama that I've been experiencing for 15 years. And this seminar constantly refreshes my dedication to my job. I laugh, and I love to laugh, I take my job seriously, I take my program seriously, but Terry I don't take too seriously or we're in big trouble. But I love to come here because I find answers. I can maybe share something that worked at our office. I really don't know what makes an effective central office, but as long as people aren't trying to get me fired and they like to come in and they feel they can find help there, I think that's what I feel good about. And when they feel it is their central office, I don't set policy, I carry it out. And coming here, I will go back with so much. I've already had so many answers since I've been here and met new friends, and it's wonderful seeing old friends, and I really thank Helen for letting me come and share tonight, and look forward to being with you for the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Helen, Terry, and George. That was fun. Now comes the time, if you happen to look at your agenda, we're going to do about a 30-minute open forum before we all dive into the ice cream. This is going to be your opportunity to ask questions, and you might get an answer. Then again, you might not. I noticed there are a couple of standing mics on the floor. Please use those, or if you have a loud voice, feel free. If you would, identify yourself, unless you want to maintain your personal anonymity, in which case just make up a name. And address your question to whomever you wish to try and get an answer from. So, who wants to be first? I'm going to start taking names in a minute. Who goes first? So don't be bashful. Here comes a question.
I'm Susan Cruz. I'm Harold Sober Alcohol from Baltimore Intergroup, and I've really enjoyed listening to all your comments. It was just a question since nobody else got up here. We've been having people calling up the office for 12-step calls, just like we always get, and we've been getting AA members to call them. People now have in their phones, they know your phone number that's calling them. Is anyone else having that trouble? We've had quite a bit of trouble from people in our AA office or on our 12-step list who are willing to take calls who now are getting harassed by who they've talked to because they have that caller ID. And their anonymity is kind of broken, and I don't know if, Terry, you've had any trouble with that? Okay, well, be prepared. I just was wondering what we can do about it. I don't know that there's a solution.
We call 40, and they get our number, so I don't know that we call 40 to go home, so I don't know if their number is revealed or not.
Well, after, when we, let's say I'm in the office and somebody calls for a 12-step call, we call an AA member. That AA member from their home calls the person seeking help.
They can do a first call block.
We can put a block on it. Okay.
Hold on, folks. Let's not all talk at once because we can't understand anybody.
Okay. Just a bit more into the electronic age and things that we're running into a little bit of a
If
problem.
anyone has a solution, a proposed solution, or an idea, or a guess, come on up to the mic.
My name is Duke.
What took you so long?
I was all the way over there.
Oh, there you are.
The first encounter I had with that was a nurse that was working in my office, and she made a call to her office, and they said, "Oh, you're from that AA Al-Anon thing." And she really didn't want her anonymity broken there, and she was crushed. And it hit me that was the problem, the phone ID. So I had called the phone company, explained our situation and who I was, and they blocked our phone there, which means they can do that on anybody's phone. And I had it done on my home phone because I quite often wind up with a night phone if if something wacky happens, which something wacky happens all the time. So you can have a phone caller ID block put on your phone. It's free.
In the Orlando area, I'm sure this would vary with your phone companies, and I would hope it's available in most of your areas. Anyone can place a phone call, and in our area, it's press star 67 before you dial the number, and it won't give your number to the person you're calling. It just puts a block. Now, make it more complicated, the person you're calling can have it on their phone that it won't accept a call unless the number is given. So, and we've run into that. So now the key is making sure that all of your 12-step people taking the calls are aware of this and know that they can use it if they choose to. But that's and contact your phone company, find out how they can keep from being ID'd. And ours is basically, if they don't want to accept the call without knowing the number, well, maybe they'll call again. You can't try to go through that. It's up to the individual making the 12-step call whether they want to give their number out or not. So.
You have the mic, sir.
I'm Dave. I'm from Mesa. We ran into that quite a bit, and we blocked our hotline at the office. I didn't realize until after a long time that caller ID came into our area that it said Alcoholics Anonymous. It didn't say East Valley Intergroup. So we blocked it, but you can do you don't have to block your line all the time. Like every area that has caller ID has a single call code you can block before you dial the number. But another problem we use a call diverter, which is like remote access call forwarding kind of a deal. And there was a problem with caller ID. Well, let me forget it. Something that would lock up the diverter or something. So the phone chair called the telephone company, and she came up with a little set of instructions. So if you have caller ID, you can temporarily disconnect that, and then you can reinstate it through another series of codes. Another problem we have is as Don was talking about, people on the 12-step list who won't accept blocked calls. Where we try and call them from the office, our number's blocked. Their phone won't accept blocked calls, and all you can do about that is take them off the 12-step list. You know, or that's the only solution we found to that.
Judy Miles, an alcoholic. I'm the office manager for the Tri-County Intergroup office in Raleigh, North Carolina. One of the things that's on the new electronic age that's come up, and I know the General Service Office is aware of it from our area, is in Raleigh there is an online AA group that has registered with the district and with the Intergroup office and is listed in our directory. And what the understanding was that that GSO had approved them as a group, and that's not true. And I was just wondering if anybody had any experience with the online groups and how you handle them, how you list them, how you in your directories, and how you deal with that.
No, I'd love to hear from all of you on this subject because we're really talking about it. But with respect to that group, we have informed them that they're wonderful and we appreciate everything they're doing and all that. But we're not going to register them because we don't know how, when, or if they should go in the directory. We're going to hand that to the Conference Report and Charter Committee, which has jurisdiction over the directory, and we felt that if we even registered them and gave them a number and then said we'll figure out how to list you later, we'd be compromising the decision as to whether and how to list them. So we ought to wrap it all up together. In the meantime, we're going to keep a list of these groups. I've talked to, just on other subjects, GSO in England this week. They're not listing them as yet. And GSO in Australia, where there's a lot of such activity because people are really spread out in the bush, and they're not listing them yet. So we love to hear what's going on. It's very helpful. But as yet, we don't, by saying we're not going to register you yet, we're not saying you're a group or not a group, or recognizing. We don't recognize people. That's not what we're looking for. You can explain that better than I can.
Fortunately, in the directory, I had just listed them as America Online and didn't list them as a group or a meeting, so it was kind of I guess, took care of that situation himself. But one of the people in our area is one of the things she does for a living is to work with these online computer companies, and she said, this is coming. And she's kind of surfing it to see what's out there. And there is a real problem with protecting anonymity. You can go in rooms, but she said, your anonymity, and she won't even go on because that's her field, that she works in, and it would throw her anonymity.
Thank you. Yeah, one more response coming.
I think we're going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow. Yeah, all right. But the other thing is that it's concerned, Judy, to a lot of us because we happen to have seen some of the things that are being put online, and people's anonymity is broken, and there are controversial things that are put on the internet and all the rest of it. So if the trustees' PI committee is going to discuss this as it relates to our traditions of anonymity and public controversy, as looking at electronic meetings as an extension, if you will, of the public media. I don't know what will come forth from that, but they're certainly going to discuss it, and it will be discussed, I'm sure, for some time. It won't just be one meeting, but they will begin to discuss it at the board meeting in October. We're having a sharing session on electronic meetings at the sharing session at this board meeting as well. So it should be very informative to bring a lot of us up to date from those who are knowledgeable, both at the office and the board, as to what's going on. And we're going to have some demonstrations as well, and the opportunity to see right on a screen and tap into one of these World Wide Webs to see what's going on. So more information will become forthcoming.
Yeah. Thank you. Why don't we give this lady a chance, and then you can come back on the mic.
Okay, this is a different subject. Did you want to?
Oh, I just had a couple of comments about that. I did a web search using the two words Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think I got 66 hits. And one of them, ironically, is sponsored by our old friend IWS.
Anyways, we ordered from central office the tapes that would put out the TV advertising on our as a public information on our local channels. But Canada apparently has different technology, and they can't run the things. I don't know if you've heard of that, or how have other cities in Canada dealt with that.
I haven't personally heard of it, and when I was on PI, I didn't hear of it. We did learn many years ago that TV stations require a certain size tape. Some stations would do that for the PI committees who took the tapes to them. They said, yes, we would like to run your PSAs. You might inquire of the station if they can do that for you. They can't do it for you.
They won't do that. No, we've been shuffled all over. Found a place that will do it for like $800.
Wow. Let's talk.
I have it all upstairs.
Let's talk a little bit about that after, okay. Because you might have it's the same kind of thing that any tapes that are produced abroad, we can't play on our recorders here, and vice versa. So it may be the same, but I haven't heard that before for Canada at all. But we'll talk a little bit after.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Marie. I'm an alcoholic. I think I'm sort of Helen's counterpart for an area. I'm the Intergroup liaison for Southeast New York. I host quarterly meetings and invite all the intergroups from my area. I had a question of second to the last meeting we had in relation to a piece of literature for the central offices and intergroups. Our delegates here tonight, and we said to them, give us something maybe that could be brought to the conference. But I'm just wondering, to me the most important piece of literature is the one that talks about the contributions. I mean, the General Service Office says give the majority of the contributions to the local intergroup. There was something else you were talking about, a sheet that you had said. Maybe I'm not making myself clear. The question that was given to me was, is there any other literature that strictly addresses central offices and intergroups that's put out by the General Service Office? Well, it was my understanding that each area had their own individual needs, so I don't know that there could be something produced like that except for...
Are you talking about a finance pamphlet of some kind? No,
not a finance pamphlet.
Specifically?
I'm not really sure. Okay. Something that would address the intergroups and the central offices as to their function?
We have the central and intergroup office guidelines, which is a compilation of shared experience about how these offices start and function.
Okay.
The hotline newsletter might help out, too.
Is that the sheet that you had just mentioned before?
No, the sheet that I mentioned before is a sheet listing all of the service material that is produced at GSO for the entire fellowship. No one specifically, but it's, I think, informative for each of us as members in whatever our job capacity is in AA.
Okay. Have you had any other questions as to that? I mean, it seems to me that in my particular area, it was one intergroup in particular seemed to be interested in that. I was just wondering if it was, you know...
Interested in what, dear?
In another specific piece of literature.
Directed specifically to central and intergroup offices on how they function?
Yes.
No, all we have are the guidelines.
Okay. And has any...
There may be other material produced by other intergroup and central offices.
But not put out by General Service?
Not put out by General Service,
okay,
no.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let me slip two quickie announcements in, and then you can continue. One, Mark has tapes that will be for sale that cover this session. And the other is that at 9:30, when we have the ice cream social, 9:30 to 10, that is going to be held near the registration desk. Okay, now, whichever one of you two is first. You have it.
I just want to know if anyone else is going through pager warfare at their office. We're getting a lot of people that are getting our phone number dumped onto their pager as practical jokes. And I haven't dealt with it yet. I didn't know what to do with it, and I knew I was coming here, so. But the one guy called, he's a high-ranking officer in the Air Force, and he got that number put on his pager, and he called. And all I could tell him was, "What, did you party hard last night?" And he goes, "Well, yeah." I go, "Well, you know our number if you ever need us." But another guy, a week later, we got 6 calls from the same guy, and he started getting mad at us. And I said, "Look, buddy, I ain't putting your number on there. Turn your machine off." But I don't know whether to call the phone company and see if they can do anything about it or what.
We have a call almost daily. What I usually say to them is, you're either the victim of a practical joke or somebody's giving you an F.
Yeah, but I worry maybe too much.
And sometimes they laugh and sometimes they say, "Oh."
I just don't want it to happen at 2 or 3 in the morning, that's all. It's hard enough to keep volunteers without getting practical crank calls.
Yeah, my name's Tom Church. I'm in the Tri-County Central Office in Tampa, Florida. And I have a question for Helen, actually. I heard you, when you were talking, mention you have messages that you receive by fax, by phone, by mobile phone, and by email. Do we have email addresses for the people at GSO? Are they available?
Not just yet. They're all in the process now of having CompuServe installed on computers. We will, I don't have all of the addresses as yet, but we will very soon. I've had email installed as a result of the international convention. Don't ask me what my address is now.
That was going to be my next question.
I really don't. We're getting some cards which have our email addresses on it, and what I could do is to